Did medieval peasants really know something about medicine that we only rediscovered centuries later? Could a doctor from the 14th century have given advice that a modern physician would nod along to despite lacking microscopes or advanced chemistry? From the dark alleys of London to the grand halls of ancient monasteries, people tried to make sense of illness and health using what they had: observation, tradition, and a deep connection to the natural world. Many of their ideas sound bizarre to us today, full of strange remedies and mystical beliefs. Yet scattered among the superstitions, some medieval old wives' tales held surprising bits of truth. Number 9. The power of hot and cold foods for your body. In the medieval world, the idea of how food interacted with the human body was deeply connected to a belief system called humoral theory. This theory, largely inherited from ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and refined by Galen, suggested that the human body was made up of 4 basic fluids, or humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Each humor was associated with specific qualities. Blood was hot and moist, yellow bile hot and dry, black bile cold and dry, and phlegm cold and moist. For a person to be healthy, these humors had to be in perfect balance. An imbalance, people believed, led to illness. This belief extended directly to diet. Every food item was thought to possess its own hot or cold, moist or dry qualities. For example, pepper was considered hot and dry, while lettuce was seen as cold and moist. A physician or an experienced cook would carefully consider these qualities when preparing meals, especially for someone who was sick. If a person was suffering from a fever, which was understood as an excess of heat, they would be prescribed cold and moist foods to cool them down and restore balance. Conversely, someone feeling sluggish or suffering from what was perceived as an excess of cold phlegm might be given hot and dry foods like spices or roasted meats. Medieval cookbooks and medical texts are full of detailed instructions about the temperament of various ingredients. Apples, for instance, were often considered cold and moist, while ginger was definitively hot and dry. Even the way a food was cooked could alter its perceived qualities. Roasting might make a food hotter and drier, while boiling could make it wetter and colder. The goal was always to achieve a harmonious state within the body. People understood that their food choices had a direct and powerful impact on their health, energy levels, and even their mood, which was also linked to the balance of humors. A melancholic person thought to have too much cold and dry black bile might be encouraged to eat warming, moist foods to counteract their internal chill. While modern science does not subscribe to the 4 humors, the medieval understanding that food impacts the body's internal environment and its state of balance holds a certain resonance. Today, we talk about metabolism, macronutrients, and micronutrients. We know that different foods have distinct thermogenic effects. For instance, spicy foods containing capsaicin can indeed create a sensation of warmth and even temporarily increase metabolic rate, aligning with the medieval idea of hot foods. Proteins, compared to carbohydrates or fats, also require more energy to digest, contributing to a post-meal thermic effect, a kind of internal warming. Fruits and vegetables, which were often classified as cold and moist, are typically high in water content and can be hydrating, contributing to a cooling sensation, especially in hot weather or when consumed raw. They also provide essential vitamins and minerals that support countless bodily functions, helping maintain overall balance and health. The medieval dietary approach, although based on a different framework, highlighted the deep connection between what a person ate and their physical well-being. It emphasized the importance of individual dietary needs and the dynamic nature of health, where careful food choices could help maintain equilibrium. Although the reasoning was rooted in humoral theory, The practical outcome was often a recognition that certain foods could affect body temperature, energy levels, and overall bodily function in ways that aligned with observed effects. It was a sophisticated system of dietary guidance, even if the underlying scientific explanation was yet to be discovered. Number 8. Eating organ meats for vitality. For many people in medieval Europe, particularly those who were not part of the wealthy elite, animal organs were a regular and important part of their diet. Unlike the nobility who might dine on prime cuts of roasted venison or boar, the common folk made full use of every part of an animal that could provide nourishment. This included what we now call offal: liver, kidneys, heart, brain, tripe, stomach lining, and even blood, which was often used to make puddings or sausages. This practice was not just about making ends meet or preventing waste. There was a widespread belief that consuming these organs could impart strength, vitality, and even specific health benefits to the person eating them. The underlying principle for this belief was often a form of like cures like, or like strengthens like. If a person felt weak or suffered from a condition affecting their own organs, it was thought that eating the corresponding organ from a healthy animal could transfer its vigor and healing properties. A person suffering from heart weakness might be advised to eat animal heart, for instance. Someone feeling sluggish and lacking energy might be encouraged to consume liver, which was seen as a powerhouse of vitality. These were not just superstitions, they were practical nutritional strategies born from centuries of observation and necessity. Farmers, laborers, and soldiers who relied on physical strength and endurance would regularly consume these nutrient-dense parts of animals, instinctively recognizing their contribution to robust health. Historical records, such as household accounts from manors or recipes from medieval kitchens, show the widespread consumption of these parts. Stews, pies, and sausages often incorporated minced organs, making them more palatable and extending the meat supply. The liver of various animals, including pig, cow, and chicken, was especially prized. It was a common ingredient in pottages, thick soups, or stews, often combined with vegetables and grains. The heart, with its strong muscular structure, was associated with courage and strength, and was believed to fortify the eater. Kidneys were also consumed, often grilled or stewed. Even less appealing parts, like the brains of animals, were sometimes prepared for consumption, especially in times of scarcity, for the sustenance they provided. In modern nutritional science, we understand precisely why these medieval practices held such an observable truth. Organ meats are quite simply nutrient powerhouses, far more concentrated in many essential vitamins and minerals than muscle meat. For example, liver is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. It is an extraordinary source of vitamin E, which is crucial for vision, immune function, and skin health. It is also packed with iron, a vital component of red blood cells needed for oxygen transport and energy. Liver is also rich in B vitamins, particularly B1,2 folate and riboflavin, which are critical for energy production, nervous system function, and DNA synthesis. A lack of these vitamins can lead to fatigue, weakness, and neurological problems. Animal heart is an excellent source of coenzyme Q10, CoCone0, an andonic that plays a key role in cellular energy production, particularly in the heart muscle itself. It also provides iron, zinc, and selenium. Kidneys are rich in selenium, the vitamins, and iron. Brains are high in omega-3 fatty acids, especially DHA, important for brain health. The medieval understanding that these parts imparted vitality was an accurate observation of their effects on the body, even without the knowledge of specific vitamins or minerals. When people ate these organ meats, they were consuming highly concentrated doses of nutrients that directly supported their energy levels, blood health, and overall physiological function, which directly translated to feeling stronger and more vital in a physically demanding world. The wisdom of eating the whole animal, a necessity born of circumstance, provided a complete nutritional profile that modern diets often lack. Number 7. The hair of the dog and its temporary relief. The phrase, hair of the dog, has a fascinating origin, initially referring to an old folk remedy for rabies. If a dog bit you, you are supposed to apply some of its hair to the wound. However, over time, the saying also came to describe the practice of drinking a small amount of alcohol the morning after a night of heavy drinking, with the belief that it would alleviate the symptoms of a hangover. This practice was certainly known in medieval Europe, where alcohol, primarily in the form of ale, beer, or wine, was a common beverage, often safer to drink than water. People noticed that some of their companions who felt terrible after a long night would feel temporarily better after consuming another drink or two. Hangovers in the medieval period were just as unpleasant as they are today, likely even more so, given the often unrefined nature of the alcoholic beverages and the lack of sophisticated pain relievers. People would wake up with headaches, nausea, dizziness, and a general feeling of unwellness. They might attribute these symptoms to various imbalances of humors, or simply the foul vapors arising from the overconsumption of drink. Without a precise understanding of alcohol's effects on the body, including dehydration and the accumulation of toxic byproducts, they sought practical remedies. The hair of the dog was one such folk remedy, a continuation of the previous night's activities rather than a complete break. It was not a universal prescription, and certainly not advocated by learned physicians who usually suggested restorative broths or more gentle remedies. Instead, it was more of a common person's folk wisdom, passed down through generations, observed among tavern-goers and those working hard and playing hard. A common practice might involve drinking a small measure of diluted ale or wine, sometimes even spiced, in the hope that it would somehow settle the stomach or clear the head. The relief, when it came, was often temporary, but for someone in acute discomfort, any fleeting respite was welcomed. There was no understanding of why it worked, only that sometimes, for some people, it seemed to lessen the immediate discomfort. From a modern scientific perspective, the hair of the dog does offer a temporary physiological effect that can mask hangover symptoms, though it is certainly not a cure and can prolong the overall recovery. A hangover is partly a form of mild alcohol withdrawal. As alcohol leaves the body, certain neurotransmitters in the brain, such as gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, which has a calming effect, and glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, can become imbalanced. When alcohol is present, it enhances GABA and suppresses glutamate, leading to feelings of relaxation and sedation. When alcohol levels drop sharply, GABA activity decreases and glutamate levels rebound, leading to overexcitement of the nervous system, which contributes to anxiety, tremors, and irritability, all common hangover symptoms. Consuming a small amount of alcohol the next morning can temporarily reactivate the GABA system and suppress glutamate, thereby alleviating these withdrawal-like symptoms. This explains the temporary relief some people experience. However, this is not a true cure. It simply delays the full onset of withdrawal symptoms and extends the time the liver needs to process the alcohol. It also contributes to further dehydration and puts more strain on the liver, which is already working to metabolize the residual alcohol and its toxic byproducts, like acetaldehyde. While the medieval person only observed the immediate, short-lived relief, modern science explains that it is a palliative measure that postpones the inevitable process of detoxification, potentially setting a person up for a more prolonged or severe hangover later. It offers a fleeting sense of wellness at the cost of genuine recovery. Number 6. Miasma theory and the quest for fresh air. Before the advent of germ theory in the 19th century, medieval people, like their ancient predecessors, largely believed that diseases were caused by miasma. This term referred to a noxious invisible vapor or bad air that emanated from decaying organic matter, stagnant water, and generally unsanitary conditions. It was thought that breathing in this putrid air was the primary way one contracted illness, especially during outbreaks of plague or other epidemics. The air in crowded, unhygienic cities, with open sewers and piles of refuse, was often thick with unpleasant smells, and people made a direct correlation between these foul odors and the spread of disease. This belief in miasma profoundly influenced medieval sanitation practices and personal habits. While they didn't understand bacteria or viruses, they observed that disease seemed to flourish in places that smelled bad and were poorly ventilated. Consequently, there was a concerted effort to remove sources of foul odors and to ensure a supply of fresh air. People would try to air out their homes, open windows, and avoid areas with stagnant water or visible decay. During periods of plague, individuals would carry pomanders, small balls of aromatic substances like ambergris or spices, to sniff, believing the pleasant smells would protect them from the noxious miasma. Physicians and wealthy citizens might even flee to the countryside or higher elevations, where the air was perceived as cleaner and freer from corrupting vapors. Municipalities, particularly after devastating outbreaks like the Black Death, sometimes enacted rules aimed at improving public hygiene, not out of an understanding of microscopic pathogens, but driven by miasma theory. They would try to clear away animal carcasses, remove human waste from streets, and sometimes even relocate tanneries or slaughterhouses outside city walls because of their offensive odors. Burning aromatic herbs, incense, or strong-smelling woods was also a common practice, both for ritualistic purification and as a practical measure to purify the air, driving away the perceived miasma. It was a logical conclusion based on the sensory information available. If something smells bad, it must be bad for you. While the fundamental premise of miasma theory, that disease originates solely from bad smells, was incorrect, the practices it encouraged often led to positive health outcomes. Modern science understands that diseases are caused by pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Many of these pathogens thrive in the very conditions that produce foul odors, decaying organic matter, stagnant water, and crowded, unventilated spaces. When medieval people removed refuse, aired out their homes, or avoided crowded, unsanitary areas, they were unknowingly reducing their exposure to the actual vectors of disease. For example, proper ventilation, encouraged by the desire for fresh air, directly dilutes airborne pathogens like those that cause respiratory illnesses, tuberculosis, influenza. Removing human and animal waste, though done to eliminate foul smells, also removed breeding grounds for bacteria like E. coli or Salmonella, which can cause gastrointestinal diseases and reduce the populations of disease-carrying insects like flies. Seeking higher ground or less populated areas during plagues reduced exposure to infected individuals, thereby lowering the risk of person-to-person transmission. So, while the medieval explanation for disease was flawed, many of the actions taken based on miasma theory accidentally contributed to better public health and reduced the spread of infectious diseases. Their keen observation of the correlation between stench and sickness led them to practices that for different reasons indeed made their environments safer. Number 5. Fasting for bodily cleansing and health. Fasting was a deeply ingrained practice in medieval Europe, primarily driven by religious observance. The Christian calendar, especially during Lent, Advent, and numerous feast days, mandated periods of abstinence from certain foods, particularly meat and dairy. Beyond spiritual purification and penance, however, there was also a widespread belief, supported by medieval medical texts and folk wisdom, that fasting held significant health benefits. It was thought to cleanse the body of impurities, to rebalance the humors, and to give the digestive system a much-needed rest, thereby restoring overall health. Physicians, following Galenic principles, often prescribed dietary restrictions or fasting for various ailments. If a patient presented with symptoms of repletion, meaning an excess of humors or bodily fluids, a period of reduced food intake or complete fasting might be recommended to help the body purge itself. It was believed that a period of abstinence would allow the body to rid itself of undigested humors or corrupting influences that accumulated from excessive or improper eating. People observed that after a period of fasting they often felt lighter, clearer-headed, and experienced a sense of renewed vitality. This empirical observation reinforced the belief in fasting's restorative power. Beyond formal medical prescriptions, many individuals practiced periodic fasting or light eating as a general preventative measure, believing it contributed to long-term health and helped stave off illness. Monasteries, as centers of learning and spiritual practice, often experimented with and documented the effects of various diets and fasting regimens, reinforcing the idea that it contributed to a clear mind and healthy body. The focus was on purging the body, removing what was considered stagnant or harmful through voluntary deprivation. This was not about starvation, but about controlled, temporary cessation or reduction of food intake. Modern scientific research into the physiological effects of fasting, particularly intermittent fasting and caloric restriction, has revealed several mechanisms that align with the medieval observations of improved health and vitality. While we no longer speak of humors or impurities in the medieval sense, we understand that periods without food can trigger various beneficial cellular processes. One such process is autophagy, where cells clean out damaged molecules and cellular debris, essentially repairing themselves. This cellular housekeeping contributes to cellular rejuvenation and can reduce inflammation throughout the body. Fasting also impacts metabolic health. It can improve insulin sensitivity, meaning the body becomes more efficient at using glucose for energy and storing it, which is beneficial for blood sugar control and can reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. During fasting, the body shifts from burning glucose to burning stored fat for energy, a process that can lead to weight management and changes in body composition. Research also suggests that fasting periods can support gut health by giving the digestive system a break and allowing beneficial gut bacteria to flourish. The medieval understanding that fasting cleansed the body and restored health corresponds to modern findings about cellular repair, metabolic efficiency, and anti-inflammatory effects. While the language and underlying theories were different, the observed benefits of controlled periods of food abstinence were remarkably consistent across centuries. Number 4. Urine as a diagnostic tool and disinfectant. In medieval medicine, urine was far more than just a waste product. It was considered a valuable diagnostic tool and, surprisingly to modern sensibilities, sometimes used in practical remedies. Physicians, often called piss prophets, would carefully examine a patient's urine, a practice known as uroscopy. They would scrutinize its color, clarity, smell, and even taste, though this practice likely declined over time. Different colors, from pale yellow to dark red or green, were thought to indicate specific imbalances of humors or the presence of various diseases. A murky appearance, a particular odor, or the presence of sediment were all interpreted as signs of illness within the body. Uroscopy was a cornerstone of medieval medical diagnosis. A physician might spend considerable time holding a flask of urine up to the light, rotating it, and observing any changes or particles within. The knowledge required to interpret these signs was often extensive, passed down through generations of medical practitioners and documented in medical treatises. For instance, reddish urine might suggest an excess of blood or a fever, while pale, watery urine could point to a deficiency or a cold condition. The sweetness of urine, though likely not tasted by many, was even noted in ancient texts as a sign of a particular disease which we now recognize as diabetes. Beyond diagnosis, urine was also believed to have practical applications, sometimes even as a crude disinfectant. In an era without modern antiseptics, some folk remedies and even battlefield practices involved using urine to cleanse wounds. The reasoning was often based on the belief that urine was sterile as it left the body and might contain properties that could help clean a cut or stop bleeding. Soldiers, for example, might be desperate for any available means to prevent infection on the battlefield. Although less common in formal medical practice, these folk uses persisted in certain contexts. From a modern scientific standpoint, while we certainly do not advocate using urine as a disinfectant, its role in diagnosis is firmly established and continues to be a crucial part of modern medicine. Urine is indeed typically sterile within the bladder of a healthy individual. While it does not possess strong antiseptic qualities, it does contain urea, a nitrogenous compound that can break down into ammonia. Ammonia can have some limited antiemetic properties. More importantly, the practice of uroscopy as a method of detecting disease was remarkably prescient. Modern urinalysis is a fundamental diagnostic tool used worldwide. We analyze urine for a vast array of indicators. The color and clarity of urine can still provide clues about hydration levels and the presence of blood or other substances. The smell can indicate infections or metabolic disorders. And laboratory tests can detect substances that medieval physicians could only guess at. Glucose, sugar. Its presence points to diabetes, confirming the ancient observations of sweet urine. Proteins can indicate kidney disease or other systemic conditions. Blood cells suggests infection, kidney stones or injury. Bacteria and white blood cells, signs of a urinary tract infection. Ketines, suggestive of diabetic ketoacidosis or starvation. The medieval piss prophets, despite their limited understanding of physiology and chemistry, were keen observers. They recognized that urine was a window into the body's internal state. Their diagnostic techniques, though rudimentary, laid the groundwork for modern urinalysis, which now uses sophisticated chemical tests and microscopy to reveal a wealth of information about a patient's health. The medieval belief in urine's diagnostic power was a powerful intuition that continues to be validated and expanded upon by science today. Number 3. Garlic as a shield against disease and evil. Garlic, with its pungent aroma and distinctive flavor, held a special place in medieval European society, not just as a culinary ingredient, but also as a powerful medicinal and protective agent. People believed that garlic possessed potent properties to ward off evil spirits, protect against various illnesses, and even serve as a remedy for existing ailments. It was common to see garlic hung above doorways, worn around the neck, or consumed regularly, particularly during times of plague or widespread sickness. The belief in its protective powers was deeply ingrained in folklore and everyday life. Medieval texts and herbals describe garlic's extensive use in medicine. It was prescribed for a wide range of conditions, from coughs and colds to worms and fevers. Physicians and herbalists would often prepare garlic poultices for wounds, believing it could draw out infection or cleanse the area. For internal ailments, raw garlic was frequently consumed, sometimes crushed, and mixed with honey or vinegar to make it more palatable. Its strong smell was considered a deterrent to both supernatural evils and the bad airs or miasma believed to cause disease. People observed that those who consumed garlic regularly seemed to fare better during epidemics, attributing this to its mysterious protective qualities. Charlemagne, the great Frankish king, even mandated the cultivation of garlic on his imperial estates in the 8th century, recognizing its value for both food and medicine. This shows that its use was widespread and supported at high levels of society. The common folk, however, were perhaps its most enthusiastic proponents, relying on it as a readily available and affordable home remedy. It was a staple in the diet of peasants and laborers, who needed to stay healthy to work and survive. The belief in its efficacy was strengthened by centuries of anecdotal evidence and personal experiences. From a modern scientific perspective, the medieval reverence for garlic is remarkably well-founded, though the mechanisms are now understood in terms of biochemistry rather than magic or spirits. Garlic contains a remarkable array of sulfur compounds, the most notable of which is allicin. Allicin is released when garlic is crushed or chopped, and it is largely responsible for garlic's distinctive smell and many of its biological effects. Modern research has shown that these sulfur compounds possess significant antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties. Studies have demonstrated that garlic extract can inhibit the growth of various bacteria, including some strains resistant to antibiotics, and has efficacy against certain fungi and viruses. This aligns directly with the medieval belief that garlic could ward off or heal infections. For example, antibacterial. Allicin works by interfering with the synthesis of RNA and proteins in bacteria, disrupting their ability to grow and reproduce. Antifungal. Garlic compounds have been shown to be effective against Candida albicans, a common yeast infection. Antiviral. Some studies suggest that garlic may enhance immune cell activity, helping the body fight off viral infections like the common cold or influenza. Immune system support. Beyond its direct antiemetic effects, garlic is also known to boost the immune system by stimulating the activity of certain immune cells, such as macrophages and natural killer cells, which play a crucial role in defending the body against pathogens. The medieval practice of using garlic for protection and healing was, in essence, an intuitive application of a powerful, natural antiemetic agent. While they attributed its power to spirits or a general goodness, they accurately observed that it seemed to reduce the incidence and severity of various illnesses. Their reliance on garlic was a form of empirical pharmacology, recognizing a beneficial effect without understanding the intricate chemical processes at play. Number 2. Willow bark for easing pain and fever. Long before the invention of modern pharmaceuticals, people in medieval Europe, much like their ancient ancestors, turned to nature for remedies. Among the most widely known and effective natural painkillers was the bark of the willow tree. For centuries, across various cultures, infusions or decoctions made from willow bark were a common folk remedy for alleviating pain, reducing fever, and calming inflammation. This knowledge was passed down through generations, often maintained by local herbalists, wise women, and monastic healers. The practice involved either chewing small pieces of willow bark directly, or more commonly boiling strips of the bark in water to create a bitter tea or brew. This concoction would then be given to individuals suffering from a range of ailments, including headaches, joint pain, menstrual cramps, or the fever and aches associated with colds and other illnesses. People observed that consuming willow bark brought about a noticeable reduction in discomfort, often easing the severity of symptoms that otherwise left them debilitated. The slow, gentle onset of relief was valued, providing comfort without the harsh side effects of some other medieval remedies. Medieval herbals, such as those produced in monasteries or the Herbarium Apulae Platonici, would often list willow among their medicinal plants, detailing its preparation and uses. It was readily available in most temperate regions, making it an accessible remedy for both the wealthy and the common folk. Its widespread use and consistent presence in historical medical texts attest to its perceived effectiveness in treating the symptoms of pain and inflammation. The understanding was simply that this particular plant had a virtue or inherent power to alleviate suffering, a natural gift from the earth. From a modern scientific perspective, the medieval reliance on willow bark was incredibly astute. Willow bark contains a compound called salicin. When ingested, salicin is metabolized by the body into salicylic acid. Salicylic acid is the primary active ingredient in the willow bark, and is the direct precursor to acetylsalicylic acid, which is the chemical name for aspirin, one of the most widely used pain relievers and anti-inflammatory drugs in modern medicine. Aspirin is classified as a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, NSAID. It works by inhibiting enzymes known as cyclooxygenases, COX1 and COX2, which are involved in the production of prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are hormone-like compounds that play a key role in the body's inflammatory response, the sensation of pain, and the regulation of body temperature. By blocking their production, aspirin reduces inflammation, alleviates pain, and lowers fever. The salicin in willow bark functions in a very similar way. When the medieval person consumed willow bark tea, the salicin was absorbed and converted slowly and steadily into salicylic acid within their body. This natural compound then acted to reduce the physiological processes, causing pain and fever. While the exact chemical process was unknown to them, their empirical observation of willow bark's pain-relieving and fever-reducing properties was spot on. They had discovered a natural pharmaceutical centuries before the chemical synthesis of aspirin in a laboratory. Their wisdom was rooted in generations of trial and error and careful observation of the natural world, leading them to a remedy whose efficacy is fully explained by modern pharmacology. Number 1. Leeches for bad blood and healing. In the medieval period, the practice of bloodletting was a cornerstone of medical treatment, driven by the humoral theory that dominated medical thought. Physicians believed that an imbalance of the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, caused illness. Too much blood, for instance, was thought to lead to fever, inflammation, or other afflictions. To restore this crucial balance, blood needed to be removed from the body, while surgical incisions were common for this purpose. Another prevalent and often preferred method was the application of leeches. Leeches, specifically the medicinal leech, Hirudo medicinalis, were highly valued tools in the medieval physician's kit. They were considered less invasive than a direct cut, and were thought to be particularly effective for localized swelling, bruising, or conditions where a precise removal of bad blood was desired. A physician would apply one or more leeches to the affected area of the patient's body. The leech would then attach itself and feed, drawing out a measurable amount of blood before detaching. People believed that the leech was literally drawing out the diseased or corrupt blood, thereby cleansing the body and restoring humoral balance. The act of blood removal was considered therapeutic, reducing excess pressure or inflammation. Historical medical texts, including those derived from ancient Greek and Roman practices and refined by medieval Islamic scholars like Avicenna, frequently describe the use of leeches for a wide array of conditions: headaches, fevers, skin ailments, joint pain, and even mental disturbances. The practice was so widespread that leech even became an informal term for a physician. The belief in their efficacy was based on observed outcomes. Patients sometimes reported feeling better after leech applications, even if the underlying reasons were misunderstood. The visible reduction in swelling or bruising certainly seemed to support the idea that something harmful was being removed. From a modern scientific perspective, while bloodletting as a general cure for all ailments has been largely discredited, the use of medicinal leeches has experienced a remarkable resurgence in specific highly targeted medical applications. This is due to the complex pharmacological properties of the leech's saliva, which medieval practitioners unknowingly harnessed. When a medicinal leech attaches itself and feeds, it injects a cocktail of bioactive compounds into the patient's bloodstream. These compounds include hirudin, a powerful anticoagulant that prevents blood from clotting. This allows the blood to flow freely from the bite site, enabling the leech to feed and ensuring continued blood flow in the treated area, even after the leech has detached. Hyaluronidase, an enzyme that increases tissue permeability, allowing other compounds in the saliva to penetrate deeper into the tissues. Kaolin, another anticoagulant that also inhibits platelet aggregation. Destabilisase, an enzyme with thrombolytic properties, meaning it helps dissolve existing blood clots. Anesthetics, compounds that numb the bite area, making the attachment relatively painless for the patient. Vasodilators, substances that widen blood vessels, increasing blood flow to the area. In modern medicine, these properties make leeches invaluable in microsurgery and reconstructive surgery. For example, after the reattachment of a severed finger or toe, blood flow to the tiny veins can be compromised, leading to venous congestion, blood pooling. This pooling can cause the tissue to swell, turn purple, and eventually die. Applying medicinal leeches to the congested area allows them to draw off the excess blood. More importantly, the anticoagulants and vasodilators in their saliva continue to promote blood flow through the reattached veins for hours after the leech detaches, helping to relieve the congestion and prevent blood clots from forming, thereby saving the reattached limb. Leeches are also used for chronic venous diseases and in certain forms of arthritis for their anti-inflammatory properties. So while medieval doctors incorrectly believed leeches drew out bad humors, they empirically observed that leeches could indeed alleviate swelling, reduce pain, and sometimes improve outcomes for certain conditions. Their old wives' tale had a profound, albeit misunderstood, basis in the biochemical power of leech saliva, a power that modern medicine has now precisely identified and harnessed for highly specialized therapeutic applications.